Today on the show, you and I discuss why we didn't discuss Jussie Smollett until today. Plus, is YouTube turning you into a conspiracy theorist?
Welcome to the future, where the glass is half full and you'll need new glasses, where you'll be jumping from conclusions.
The past is annulled, and a new future is born.
Never before in history has so much meant so little to so many. AD on the radio.
So, it happened again. As if to prove the point that you and I were discussing last week, it happened again. And it's going to keep happening. Sometimes it's going to be more visible, sometimes less. But people will continue to jump to conclusions. People will continue to jump to conclusions because they want some righteous indignation and outrage. They want to be able to have a story that supports their narrative. People want to jump to conclusions because, it's fun. It's exciting. And if you're the media, you want people to jump to conclusions, and you want to jump to conclusions yourself because it's very good for business. It's good for clicks. It's good for advertising dollars. Hang journalistic responsibility, hang integrity, hang having all the facts. No, let's just go ahead and do whatever it is that puts cash in the old checking account. And that's what's been happening left, right, and center. You and I discussed it at length last week with regard to the situation, the Vietnam veteran, the Native American Vietnam veteran, and the snarky kid, a snarky Catholic school kid. The picture that ignited 1,000 ill-informed headlines. The picture that caused violence to be threatened to a child and his family. The picture that, as it turned out, did not tell the full story. And you know what? The full story's unraveling as we speak. We don't have all the facts. But the fact that we do have is that when people leap to these sorts of conclusions, they're not doing anybody any kind of favors. And I say it happened again because of what's going on with that Jussie Smollett guy. Now, this was a big story that you and I studiously avoided as it was unfolding. And you know why we didn't bring it up on this show? As much as I got emails and tweets and all sorts of communications about it, is because, I didn't really know what was going on. I didn't have all the facts. First and foremost, I've never watched the show Empire. I didn't know who Jussie Smollett was. Knew nothing about the situation. So, I don't know. I had a full day, plenty of other things that I wanted to talk about. I wasn't about to weigh in all heavy-handed just because that was what everybody else was talking about that day. There's this idea in talk radio, in news in general, that there's a story A. And whatever it is, you got to be talking about it. Story A is this. Everybody's talking about this. Everybody wants to hear about this. Everybody wants to hear your take on this, AD. And you know what? Oftentimes, I don't go with story A for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, more and more lately, story A seems to be a developing story. Story A seems to be a developing story where people are only too willing to weigh in without having all the facts, or even a fraction of the facts. And people are really eager to form a narrative. People are really eager to take a side when they don't have the necessary information to do so. And that just winds up making you look stupid. Now, the media don't care that it makes them look stupid because, really, they don't care if you are. The media doesn't care about bringing you half-truths. The media doesn't care about not having fulfilled their journalistic obligation to collect facts before reporting on them. The media cares about clicks. The media cares about views. The media cares about advertising. The media cares about ratings. News stopped being an informative thing years and years ago with the advent of the 24-hour news cycle. It's been about dollars and cents and had very little to do with what's actually going on in the world for some time now. The news became entertainment. And that's a real shame, because it would be great if we had one remaining bastion of journalistic integrity. And a lot of people think that maybe we do. A lot of people would point to certain news sources and say, well, they just give you the facts. They're not editorializing. And I don't know. I just know that The reason people are quick to jump to a conclusion and a narrative is because they haven't been punished for getting it wrong yet. With the Jussie Smollett thing, there's a lot of people that wind up looking awfully stupid, but the media don't care. They're not being held accountable. Politicians in some way, shape, or form are. When Kamala Harris called what happened to Jussie Smollett a modern-day lynching, well, she's been forced to do some serious backpedaling. But the media don't care. The media just care what drives clicks. If it affected their bottom line, if people stopped watching them, if people stopped clicking on their links, if people stopped reading their articles, if people took the food out of their mouths and the shirts off of their backs, they would go, oh man, maybe we got to be responsible. Maybe we have to have integrity. Maybe we have to look for truth before we publish the incendiary headline. But you know what? The media hasn't been published by you and I, the American people, for their half-truths and their half-assed reporting. And they're jumping to conclusions and they're rushing to get a headline out there on story A just because it's going to help them put cash in the bank. Only when you turn that sort of thing off, only when you stop clicking on the links, only when you avoid it, only when you yourself stop sharing that sort of stuff online, that's when their bottom line will be affected. And that's maybe when they'll rethink the idea of journalistic integrity and truth and all of the above. But I bring this up because it was story A, what was going on with Jussie Smollett for a while. And I didn't talk about it on the show for a couple of very important reasons. Reason number one, this idea that I have to talk about story A, as much as a whole bunch of bosses of mine have tried to reinforce this over and over again, I'm not a big fan of the herd mentality. I'm not a big fan of covering things that other people have covered. I'm not a big fan of rushing to put my spin on something that you've been beaten to death with all day. As much as I get emails and tweets and communications from people saying, this is what's been going on. What do you think of it? What everybody else is doing has never been all that interesting to me. And I'm guessing if you're listening to this show, it's never been all that interesting to you. But the other reason, the main reason I didn't weigh in on the Jussie Smollett thing was because, well, I knew I didn't have all the facts. I knew what it looked like. I knew the conclusion that people were jumping to. I knew that it looked like a horrible, hideous, awful hate crime. But at the same time, I didn't know who this guy was. I didn't have the time to do the necessary research, and I had certain misgivings about it. Only because, well, some friends of mine in the entertainment industry, people that are connected to that sort of musical scene that he's involved with, in addition to the show Empire, were like, this looks hokey. And I remember asking a friend of mine why, and he was like, I'm a black man. Jussie Smollett is a black man. If this happens to you, you don't leave the rope around your neck.
Real radio.
104.1. Where the left and right come together for fundamental truths. AD on the radio, on Twitter at ADSXE.
So like I said, you and I, we steered clear of the whole Jussie Smollett situation last week for a couple different reasons. One, I didn't feel like, I had to abide by the herd mentality of the media by covering something that everybody else was covering. I feel like what's interesting to you and I is perhaps things that aren't being covered by everybody else. The other reason was because I didn't have all the facts. Not only did I not know who Jussie Smollett was until this happened, but when I talked to some buddies about this, people that are sort of connected to that musical scene that he's part of, they had some misgivings about it. I was like, really? It doesn't track right for you? They're like, no, something's weird about it. And it wasn't this whole matter of it being a conspiracy or a matter of it being staged. But a friend of mine who works in hip-hop music and R&B music said, You know what doesn't feel right about it? I was like, what? He was like, well, I'm a black man. Jussie Smollett is a black man. And he kind of did something that I just can't imagine that any black person or any person, but especially any black person, would ever do in this situation, which is the rope that was placed around his neck, the noose, he left it there. And it was almost like he did that for dramatic effect. Now, the theory that was being floated in the hip hop community and the urban community was that this was a lover's quarrel. This was a fight between Jussie Smollett and someone who he'd been romantically involved with that turned ugly. And that after it got physical, after Jussie Smollett was beaten up, it was turned into something else. Because it just wasn't a good look for him to have had a lover's quarrel. If he was going to be beaten up, it had to be on the verge of him putting out a new album, something where he could be portrayed in a sympathetic light. So that was the idea. That's what people thought the show business spin on it was. That this was a lover's quarrel that turned really, really ugly. That was according to a buddy of mine. Like I said, I'd never seen Empire in my entire life. I had no idea who Jussie Smollett was. But when I talked to some buddies about it, they're like, nah, this doesn't seem... There's some things about this that just don't track, that don't feel right, that don't smell right. Now, if this was a hate crime, it's horrible, horrible, awful, terrible thing. And when I was having these conversations with buddies of mine, it wasn't in any way, shape, or form minimizing the severity of hate crimes. It was just saying there's something that feels a little weird about this. But that was the idea. That's what a lot of people, I think, in the entertainment industry thought, that there was a fight and it was made to look like something other than what it was. Now, these are the things that made me steer away from it. These are the things that made me not want to jump on the bandwagon of going, oh my gosh, this was a horrible hate crime and a modern day lynching. This is terrible. And it was obviously linked to Donald Trump. The idea that, I think, what was the story that they said this is MAGA country, and that was part of the beating he received and all of the above, and horrible, awful, ugly stuff that was said to have happened. But it just didn't seem like something that I was ready to talk about. Because, look, you use terms like a modern day lynching. Someone beaten, bleach thrown on them, a rope thrown around their neck. That's awful stuff. Horrible, terrible stuff. And you kind of want to know what you're talking about when you're dealing with something that is so serious. So I steered away from it because we didn't have facts. We didn't have all the facts. It did not stop millions of other journalists and politician types from weighing in a way that suggested they had absolute certainty with regard to what happened, and in a way that sort of helped a narrative that they could gain from be supportive. Whether it was media and they were gaining from the clicks and the views, or whether it was political or social and they were gaining from the claim that there had been a hideous racist attack. Hideous racist homophobic attack. Anyways, here's what we do know so far. And bear in mind, I still haven't come to any conclusion. We don't know. And to everybody that was saying, oh, this was definitely staged. This was definitely staged. We don't know that yet either. But the deal is this. Chicago police won't admit it officially yet, but several news outlets claim they're now investigating whether Empire star Jussie Smollett staged the alleged hate crime against him. TMZ even claimed that the case is headed to a grand jury this week. Last week, police raided the home of two men as potential persons of interest in the alleged attack that occurred on January 29th. The men are brothers from Nigeria. And they're not white, as Smollett claimed his attackers were. One of them was apparently a personal trainer who had worked with Smollett. and the two of them might have also worked on Empire. Sources say that Smollett paid the brothers $3,500 to attack him, right down to putting that rope around his neck, throwing some kind of chemical on him, and yelling racial and homophobic slurs at him. Bleach was found at their home. They were being held as potential suspects, but this past Friday, just gone by, they were released without charges, and they were said to be cooperating with the police. One thing police did say is that information that they got from these guys has, quote, shifted the trajectory of the investigation. And now they want to interview Smollett again. Jussie's attorney is, of course, denying that he had anything to do with the attack, saying, quote, as a victim of a hate crime who has cooperated with the police investigation, Jussie Smollett is angered and devastated by recent reports that the perpetrators are individuals he is familiar with. He has now been further victimized by claims attributed to these alleged perpetrators that Jussie played a role in his own attack. Nothing is further from the truth, and anyone claiming otherwise is lying. And you know, a lot of media folks had some misgivings about the situation. The folks over at Good Morning America, where he did his tell-all interview with Robin Roberts. After it was done, apparently they felt doubtful about the story Jussie Smollett had told. Before the validity of the story was in question, Smollett went to ABC asking to do the sit-down. And the network was, well, stoked about it because everybody wanted the interview. But when the interview wrapped and Smollett and his team took off, apparently there was an immediate feeling that something wasn't right, that something was amiss. Apparently, he requested that Robin Roberts conduct the interview because he, to some extent, knows her personally. She appeared on an episode of that show, Empire, he's on as well. The interview aired on Valentine's Day, little over 2 weeks after Smollett claimed that these two men attacked him with rope and bleach in Chicago while shouting racist and homophobic slurs. Like we said, the men in question, two brothers who have also appeared on Empire, have since said that Smollett paid them to fake the attack. Roberts on Monday defended the network's decision to air the interview, saying at that time on Tuesday, police officers were saying that his account was consistent, it was credible, and that he was being cooperative. Now, this was all before the interview aired on Thursday, when we found out about the brothers. So, there's massive legal consequences for Smollett. Grand jury begins hearing evidence that could lead to felony indictment. I think that happened today, or is it happening today or tomorrow? Soon. And not only that, but while he's working on the set of Empire, Empire writers are quickly rewriting the season's final episodes, basically working him and his big musical number out of it. So, like we said, the plot kind of thickens. Why does all this matter? Well, for the same reason it mattered when we discussed it last week.
For more stimulation and less irritation, 9 out of 10 doctors choose KPRC AM 950, Houston's more stimulating talk radio.
Don't get the blues, get all the news. We mean all of you guys out there in Radio Land. All aboard!
He's back. AD on the radio.
So the truth is important. You, me, all of us, we all learned this when we were little kids. Remember how we used to get in so much trouble if we lied to our parents? Oh man, to this day, when I talk to friends that are parents, I think the thing that disappoints them the most is when their kid lies to them. They're like, I don't know what to do. My kid's not telling the truth. My kid's lying. It is the greatest transgression against everything that we are raised to believe when we lie, when we act as though the truth doesn't matter. And the truth has become this elastic, pliable thing that can be molded and shifted for the sake of a narrative or a political stance or selling some papers or clicks or whatever the hell form of media it is that's profiting off of the truth being not as fact-based as it used to be, man, it's twisted. And I don't understand how we as a society can have such an easy time manipulating the truth to our own gain. And this is why I didn't weigh in all heavy-handed with the Jussie Smollett thing. Look, we talk about equality an awful lot on this show. We talk about horrible things that we need to stand up against, that we need to put a stop to on this show on a regular basis. I think equality is probably, if we're doing work toward anything on this show, equality is probably the thing that we find to be the most important in our conversations. That everybody in America have a shot. We talk about this all the time. Part of the reason why I love to gather folks from either side of the political fence when we have these conversations on this show, why I don't pledge an allegiance to one political party or another, is because I find it so much more productive if we can get people that think differently in the same space to talk. Besides the fact that I'm not a liberal, besides the fact that I'm not a Republican, part of the reason why I don't identify as such is because, well, I want to bring people together. Don't want to alienate folks. Look, there's certain universal wants, dreams, goals in America that we all have. We all want to have a job that hopefully is meaningful, that hopefully puts enough money in our pocket to put a roof over our heads. If we have kids, we want those kids to have a shot at an education, a shot at a chance in life that is hopefully better than the one we had. Whether we're on the left or the right or somewhere else, we all want these things. And if we bear in mind that we want these things, when we come together and we talk, well, hopefully we can go, hey, we want the same stuff. We just have different ideas about the best way to get there. What if we stopped and actually listened to each other and learned from each other instead of fighting with each other? That way we might all get there a little bit quicker. These are the things that we work toward on this show. This is the kind of equality that becomes important to us. And it's important to us not just because of this idea that equality matters, which it absolutely does, but equality is going to help us all get there sooner, faster. And so, this is why we don't rail against incomplete stories, because it supports a political narrative. This is why we wait till facts come in. This is why we try and be the cooler head that prevails in these situations where everybody's dogpiling on something, eager to make it look like a certain thing when it might not be that thing. This is why we hang back and why we discuss a little later when there's a few more facts that have come in. This is why we're not the Kamala Harrises of this world. Kamala Harris was asked about her previous tweet that the Jussie Smollett incident was a modern-day lynching. And she had to awkwardly stumble through her answer, saying, I think the facts are unfolding and I'm very concerned about it, obviously. She didn't condemn him. And you know what? Nor should she, because she doesn't have all the facts yet. She said, what did Kamala Harris say? On January 29th, she said, Jussie Smollett is one of the kindest, most gentle human beings I know. I'm praying for his quick recovery. This was an attempted modern-day lynching. No one should have to fear for their life because of their sexuality or color of their skin. We must confront this hate. And you know what? When she was asked about that tweet in New Hampshire on Monday, first she said she was unfamiliar with the tweet while looking around at a staffer for guidance. The reporter pressed her about the tweet and said that it is a modern-day lynching. Harris awkwardly laughed before stumbling through a response, saying, okay, I will say this about that case. I think the facts are unfolding, and I'm very concerned about... and sort of trailed off and excused herself. And she laughed, too, which was weird. It was nervous, awkward laughter. But there's nothing to laugh about in these situations, and she's not the only one. Look, this is hate, if this was real. But wading in all heavy-handed saying we have to do something about this when it didn't happen, well, that's just puffing yourself up and kind of sort of spreading more division. Which is great for business if you're a politician, obviously. But we're not politicians. We're people. We're Americans. And we need to be able to get along. We need to be able to be on the same page. And you know what? There are plenty of incidences of hate. There are plenty of incidences of prejudice with regard to sexuality, color. There are racially motivated hate crimes that happen every single day. But this was sexy. This was Hollywood. This had glitz and glamour all over it. This was a chance for people to make a bunch of money and gain a bunch of political ground. So they didn't let the facts get in the way, which is, quite frankly, disgusting and doesn't help. Doesn't help even a little bit. So, am I saying, oh, it was a hoax? Yeah, there is no racism. Yeah. Jussie Smollett's a liar. No, not saying any of this. We don't know exactly what happened yet. It is looking more and more like Jussie Smollett engineered this whole thing, but I don't know that. You don't know that. We don't have facts yet. There's grand jury stuff. There's police stuff going on. And I'm not going to be irresponsible enough to go off all half-cocked in this situation and pronounce it as one thing or another. What I am going to do is go off fully cocked and loaded on members of the media, members of the politicians who did jump on this without having facts. Jumped on it without having facts and immediately started a wave of fear-mongering and division, which is exactly what you're doing when you say, oh man, there's people that are going to beat the living crap out of you and attempt to do something that's tantamount to a modern day lynching because you are black and because you are not straight. Got to watch out for that. I have friends, many friends who aren't straight. I have many friends that aren't white. And you know, when I talked to them about this, they'd read the headlines. They'd seen some things that happened. And there were some that went, I don't know, this doesn't track right to me. But there were a lot of people that said the fact that something like this could happen in this day and age in 2019, it makes me afraid. It makes me afraid walking out of my house. It makes me afraid that this is a point that we've come to in America where just because you are not white and you are successful and you are of a different color of skin, you could become a target. This is horrible. This is terrible. This makes me scared to leave my home. I had this conversation with two friends, neither of whom were white, neither of whom were straight. And I sympathized with them. And I didn't want to downplay their feelings by going, hey, we don't have all the facts yet. But the bottom line is, that fear that they felt, whether what happened to Jussie Smollett was real or not, that fear that they felt was real. And that causes suspicion, and that causes division. And sometimes people are right to be afraid. People are right to be afraid of racism and prejudice. But as it turns out, we didn't have the facts here. And so there were people that were scared to leave their homes that I knew because of media and politicians who are quick to jump all over this narrative. I feel really, really bad for my friends who are frightened unnecessarily. And I feel even worse for America having wound up more divided than it was a couple weeks ago because of this. The only truth that seems to have come out of all of this so far is that, well, the truth doesn't matter. And we, you and me, because it's not going to be politicians, it's not going to be media, we have to do better.
Now, more AD on the radio.
So, you know, you and I will get into the events of today in our segment, My Witness News, in just a little bit. Right now, though, I wanted to talk to you about being a kid. Do you remember what it was like to be a kid? Do you remember what it was like to be young? Now think for a second about the type of person that you were when you were 15, 16, 17, 18 years old, and the things that you did and how they must have made your parents feel, because you were completely devoid of any knowledge of how the world worked. I talked with my dad when we were hanging out over the holidays, and as we were going down memory lane, I realized that there were so many things that I said and I did that my parents managed to remain frighteningly calm about. I was like, Dad, how did you deal with this? Like, I'm this idiot kid saying these stupid things, doing these stupid things, making these lousy decisions. How on earth did you put up with it? How on earth did I not drive you crazy? He was like, you may have driven us a little bit crazy, but here's the thing. You just kind of have to deal with that because that's part of growing up. It's the scariest thing ever. But at some point, you have to let go a little by little, bit by bit. I remember my father told me about a year ago when I was well into adulthood, beating the crap out of my 30s, that for the first time in his life, he wasn't worried about me and my sister. He's like, you know, for the first time ever, my final thought when I put the head down on the pillow and go to sleep at night is not that I'm worried about you or concerned about you or scared what might happen to you. I was like, really? It's taken this long? He's like, oh, yeah. And so it really, really spoke to me when, after having had these conversations with my dad, I came across this genius bit of wisdom on parenting, courtesy of Ray Romano.
Why do we give 16-year-olds licenses? My son doesn't care about anything. He called me the other day, he's like, hey, Dad, I'm in the car. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm out of gas right now. I'm like, ah! What do you mean you don't know, Joe? Are you moving? Is the car moving? I'm not moving. I put my foot on the pedal. I'm not going anywhere. All right, where are you, Joe? And he's very calm now. He's la-di-da. I'm here. I'm on the 101. The 101 is a 5-lane highway. So I assume, like anybody would, oh, you're on the side of the road now? No, I'm in the middle lane right now. What do you mean, Joe? Where's the urgency? And I swear to you, this is the exchange, because I'm panicking now. What's the traffic like? Well, behind me it's bad, but it's moving in front of me. And my wife tries to spin it. You know, whatever he does, she puts the spin on it. Well, he doesn't panic. He's zen. He's a very zen-like boy. Like astronauts. Maybe he'll be an astronaut one day. Oh, you think so? Really? I don't want to burst your bubble, but if he can't interpret the gas gauge on a Mazda, no, he ain't getting in the space shuttle. I'll tell you right now.
And you know, thinking about it, I can kind of sort of vaguely understand why my father was concerned for my general health, safety, and well-being up until just a couple of years ago. Only because, well, it was only a couple of years ago that I stopped looking at Lunchables like acceptable food to eat as an adult. Yeah. Used to go to the store. Oh man, Lunchables are on sale. I'm going to buy 100 of them. 100 of them. Well, I eat a lot of them every single day, and trust me on this, they'll keep. But yeah, it took me until just a few years ago, probably right around the time my dad stopped worrying about me, to stop calling this a meal.
All I ever wanted for lunch was Lunchables, right? Lunchables were the greatest thing to ever happen to packaging, right? I say packaging because take whatever was inside a Lunchables package out, put it into a brown paper bag, and try and convince someone it's lunch. I got like 3 crackers and some wet meat discs. You know, lunch. Like, dude, why are you eating a communion wafer with ketchup on it? What, you mean, why am I eating this delicious pizza? Don't be jealous, man. I got like 1/30th of a Butterfinger for dessert. I'm gonna wash it down with 2.5 ounces of Capri Sun. Even the name, right? They even know, like, hey, is that lunch? It's Lunchable.
The great Brendan and I are on Lunchables. Is it weird that actually makes me want to eat Lunchables again? Maybe my father should be all worried. All right, let's you and I discuss the events of today in our segment, My Witness News. This is actually kind of interesting. Question for you. Have you become more of a conspiracy theorist over the last couple of years? Because I've just become more conspiracy theory aware. And, well, there's now sort of scientific proof that YouTube is turning us into a nation of conspiracy theorists. Yeah. And I don't know what it is about conspiracy theory documentaries. You might see them on YouTube. You might see them on Netflix. But whatever the case may be, I find that the lower the production value, the more it looks like it was done by somebody on their iPhone, the more likely I am to get sucked in, watch it a few times and go, maybe we really are being mind controlled by a bunch of reptilian blood drinkers that are living in a hollowed out moon. That sort of makes sense. Yeah, that definitely seems to be a thing. Only because, look, it seems like we've seen a surge in conspiracy theories over the last decade. From anti-vaxxers to the Illuminati, they're everywhere. And one recent study found that about half of Americans believe in at least one conspiracy theory. What's yours? I gotta be honest with you, I'm not 100% confident we went to the moon. And that's a long conversation that we can have at a different time. But look, are you telling me that back then we could get television and voice? We could get a picture and we could get sound. Meanwhile, in 2019, my phone drops out like 3 times a day. Anyways, therein lies my hesitation. And also, we had tremendous political motive to get to the moon before anybody else. It was an incredible spiritual buoy for America when we managed to do that. That's a whole other conversation. But yeah, one recent study found that about half of Americans believe in at least one conspiracy theory. So why are more people buying into them? According to a new study, the main culprit is YouTube. A team of researchers from Texas Tech recently interviewed 30 people at 2 flat earther conventions in North Carolina and Colorado, and literally all of them were there because of YouTube videos. 29 of the 30 people interviewed said that they never thought the earth was flat until they saw a YouTube video about it, and the one guy who hadn't learned about it on YouTube said he was there because his daughter had seen a video about it and told him. Most of them said that they've been watching conspiracy videos about other topics like 9/11 or the moon landing. Then, when YouTube offered up a flat earth video as something they might want to watch next, they were all in. The head researcher from the study doesn't think that YouTube is doing it intentionally, but says they could stop if they tweak things to promote more reliable, less homemade information. Saying, quote, their algorithm makes it easy to end up going down a rabbit hole by presenting information to people who are going to be more susceptible to it. Yes. And by the way, just last week, YouTube announced that they wouldn't be recommending conspiracy theory videos anymore. So, yeah, make of that what you will. I'll be back tomorrow. We'll do this all over again. Or will we?